he's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to the Getting Lit podcast. Last episode, we talked about Roadside Picnic with our Russian friend Masha. And this episode, we are talking about Aleister Crowley. And this idea came from Fresta, because you were reading some Aleister Crowley. And we're just going to talk about some other stuff as well. But first of all, why were you reading Aleister Crowley, and why did you subject me to this?
The truth is I wasn't even reading it. I just bought this book a while ago, The Drug and Other Stories.
It's got a pentagram on it. It's satanic.
It's got a pentagram with an eye of Horus in the middle. And I've never actually read his magical writing or whatever, his theory or any of that stuff, but I know a little bit about him. It's a fascinating life story. The Art of Darkness episode on his life is definitely worth a listen. It's pretty long, 3 hours long, but it's fascinating story. Whatever you have to say, think about the guy. He did live an interesting life.
He lived an amazing life.
Yeah, but I was just saying to you, because I know you're busy a lot at the moment, so I was I just threw that as a suggestion. I was The Drug is the name of the book, so I was well, that's usually the name that they title these short story collections is the best story in the collection, and I was curious to what it would be like, so I was well, I just threw that out as an option. I was if you got anything better to suggest, by all means. But you're that sounds cool. And turns out it's not that cool.
That's not the best story.
Maybe in 1914 or 20 or whenever he wrote it, it was interesting.
It's pretty edgy. It's basically just a description of a trip of some sort. I'm guessing peyote or something like that. Something a little bit I think DMT kind of thing.
Yeah,
Ayahuasca.
It's probably something like that influence. It's obviously also because the guy's got an alchemy set up where he's transmuting the drug, and then the trip seems to have I think there's probably metaphors for the Kabbalistic tree of life. He talks about then I saw rose and speckled with green, and then if you read these sort of Kabbalah books or whatever, there's always color in Yetzirah, rich salmon pink, color in Asiya, golden amber, color in Atsiluth, rose clear. They have all these just I don't fully understand it. I've never scaled the tree of my life myself. So I'm not even sure where to begin with that. But that, you know what I mean? I think they meditate on the different hieroglyphs or the tree of life itself and the glyphs and somehow get into a mystical vision, something like that. So I think there's sort of something in there with the story, because I read a few other stories in there, and they all seem to be sort of Rosicrucian, Hermetic, Kabbalistic sort of metaphors. Some of them are painfully tedious to read, and there's ones where I read one yesterday, it was Murder on X Street, and it wasn't even, I don't even know if it has any magical allusions or whatever, but it's just let me read a bit to you from it, just to see what I'm talking about with some of it starts off kind of fun, and then it just gets with all these mathematical little riddles and stuff where it becomes so it's at the bottom of the street, however, Lascelles saw two men bending over some object on the ground, and believing that one of them was his late assailant, he slowed down and approached them cautiously, with the result that he was unable to overhear the following extraordinary conversation which was being held between them. Said the first, "I will take the red things, and you shall have the rest." "Agreed," said the second, "but I will take from the red things such as are round." "Very good," said the first, "but of course anything that is not round, even in your original portion, comes to me." "That is hardly fair," replied the second. "If I agree to that, you must let You must let me have all the red, not round things that are golden. Done, cried the first. On the condition that you give up all you are present entitled to, everything is neither silver nor gold. An easy condition for everything I'm entitled to is silver. And that's kind of whimsical in a sort of whatever British sort of one of Victorian whatever matter. But then it gets to like stuff like all it becomes like you'd have to spend like an hour just like deciphering each one of these things. They're like whatever. I'm not gonna read it. It's tedious, but like it's like mathematical things where it's like the square root plus the thingo, the name is that, and then the letters correspond to this, and a 3-lettered word that means this is his name. And it's like some woman got thrown out of a building and then they're like, there's one body, and they're like, well, no, there's actually two. And then there's this like algebraic formula of how 1 can equal 2. I did not bother to check the maths on that.
Yeah, it's very cryptographic. A lot of it, even in the stratagem, so we read the drug and we read the stratagem, and the stratagem is kind of like that as well, where there's like they're talking about at some point like code words and also like a long string of letters that are supposed to represent something, and I guess it's all part of like Aleister Crowley's esoteric kind of cryptic like magical thinking. So he was a late 19th, early 20th century thinker. He apparently wrote a lot of short stories and a lot of poems and stuff like that before. Well, not before, but sort of, I think he was already getting into the esoteric stuff or occult stuff, but like he became more well known for the occult stuff, right? Like writing all these books about, things like he developed this system called Thelema, which is the do as thou will is the law or something like that.
Yeah, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love is just the law, something like that.
Yeah, which is just like satanic. I am God kind of stuff.
It's weird. Like some people say he's like a Satanist, and his nickname, like his mother called him like the Beast 666, and he like identified with that, and like his parents were like brethren, and like he was very religious growing up, and then at some point he decided like he was gonna just try to like I guess sin as hard as he could, and was thinking of like the worst sins he could do, and I think in those times it was largely like sodomy and stuff like that. And I think also just like blasphemy as well. Like, but I think he believes in God, but he also, it's very complicated. Some people will say like he's not actually a Satanist, but like, and it's not like the Anton LaVey Church of Satan stuff. Like that came later. I'm sure it was influenced by the crowd. Again, this stuff I'm not particularly versed in. I'm more interested in like Rudolf Steiner and like my favorite esoteric book is Meditations on the Tarot, which is way different to all this sort of stuff. Like, and it's not even like really about the tarot. It's more like it's like a Christian hermetic sort of book. Like I like the sort of like the worst stuff that doesn't seem too evil. I'm scared of a lot of the like evil, a lot of real like Golden Dawn and Crowley stuff.
So what's the difference between Golden Dawn and the Thelema stuff? Do you know? Is it just an evolution of it or something?
Yeah. Crowley was in the Golden Dawn, and there was a whole scandal where he like published writings from them because they were like, it's like a long chain of things. Like, there's like Hermeticism, and like through the Middle Ages, that's like all the alchemical texts they had to write.
Were they sort of like Masons or kind of different?
Well, yeah, a lot of the Golden Dawn members were Masons. It was like a lot of crossover, but I think the Masons is just more of like a humanist kind of organization that has like kind of like little like esoteric image. Again, I don't know a lot about Masonry really.
Honestly, Freemasonry to me just seems like, do you remember the old like cartoons? The Flintstones had one too, where like
the buffalo or whatever.
Yeah, Fred would go to the lodge, which was like the male only space, which these things apparently don't exist anymore because it's sexist to have male only spaces. But like that's what it like. Freemasons just seemed like a more fancy, like you dressed up a little bit more, and it was essentially an excuse to get away from your wife and kids. That's how I read it.
I think they had a lot more influence once upon a time, and now because there's like 2 guys at my work that are Masons. Like I saw a guy with this like Mason tattoo, at like the compass with the G and stuff. And I was like, oh, are you a Mason? And I thought he was going to be like, nah, I just thought it looked cool. But he's like, no, yeah, I'm like this. And I was like grand, blah, blah, blah of this. And he seemed just kind of like a lonely guy who was looking for community.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's what it is. He was just saying like, it's lots of ceremonies and you're always like spending like time at meetings and stuff like that. I couldn't really get out of him what they do. I think they sometimes like volunteer and clean up things and stuff like that. But I think it's just lots of like the bureaucracy inside the organization that just self-justifying. Like you go to this meeting and this ceremony and
Why would any self-respecting man sign up for more bureaucracy? Where like your entire life is like bureaucratized, and you're like,
yeah.
oh, here's some bureaucracy, but we're wearing white gloves now, so it's better. You know?
Yeah, he didn't convince me to like, become initiated in the order. So
Was he trying to?
nah, not really. I was just trying to. He was really boring to talk to. Hey, I was trying to like get information out of him, and I was like, and he was just like, yeah, he seemed just like he was lonely and he's looking for something to give his life meaning. And maybe it does that because they're like I think the American Masons are different to Australian Masons too. Again, I don't really know a lot about that. But yeah, back to the like Golden Dawn there. A lot of those members were Masons, but I think they like started engaging in the Golden Dawn because they wanted to do more like mystical, esoteric stuff. And then like there's a whole like mythology of like Christian Rosenkreuz, like someone finding his tomb and it was prophesied, and then like these documents that like descend from like Egypt, like the like like Hermeticism, like Hermes Trismegistus, like the sort of like golden the Emerald Tablet and the like Hermetic documents, whatever they're called, like the as above so below, that kind of stuff. Like there's that, which in through the Middle Ages they had to like keep it sort of cryptic, like like that's what like the alchemy stuff where people like they had to disguise it as like doing chemistry, and like whereas a lot of the people like they're trying to make like gold from lead, and some people did literally try to do that like chemically, but like you read other books and like Julius Evolar's like the Hermetic traditions all basically like, yeah, that's all just like smokescreen for like internal processes that are like the philosopher's stone is something like that exists within you, and like you've got to like try to unearth it, and like you can go through these like processes, and all of the like stuff about all of that like is to do with more like internal mystical processes and that was just like the way they could write that stuff cryptically, so only someone who was like initiated and understood the like cipher would be able to use the documents, whereas someone else reading it, like literally the term gibberish comes from like reading alchemical documents or something like that. That's how just people who would make fun of it in the Middle Ages would describe it, like what the writing is gibberish, like that language, like because and you read this stuff and it's like I have no idea what they're talking about. So you can spend your whole lifetime going down that path and all of that. But yeah, like eventually got to like the like late like 1900s, and I guess society was sort of a bit freer enough where they could organize in public a little bit, and these people would started this order, the like Golden Dawn, and it lasted for like a decade or two or something, and then that's basically like where the wealth of like Western esoteric knowledge comes from. Like once like they eventually, like it used to be secret. You'd get initiated into this order and you'd get given papers and you'd copy them down, and then you'd like practice the things. Then you go up a level and then like you get the next lot of papers and you copy them down. But yeah, like people like Aleister Crowley like published them, and then there was like lawsuits. But the judge is like, well, a lot of this stuff comes from like the Bible and things like that. So like it's not like your original work really anyway. So like it's fine. And then Israel Regardie like later published like the definitive, like really just chonker. It's like I have it. It's quite unwieldy to like use this book. It's gigantic. The Golden Dawn sort of. It's just called like the Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. It's interesting.
And is that related to Theosophy?
Well, Theosophy was like another branch of like Western mysticism kind of thing, but it's a bit more Eastern influence. That comes from Helena
Blavatsky.
Blavatsky, yeah, Madame Blavatsky. She was some kind of Russian mystic, and she's like, because they also have all these things where they'll talk about like colors and like or like symbols and things, and they disagree. They're like, no, actually, in Tippereth, the like color is this in Atsiar, or this symbol, and like Crowley differs and like this guy differs and stuff like that. And I've never read the like Secret Doctrine or any of that, the Theosophy stuff. But then there's also like Rudolf Steiner eventually came like the anthropos an
It's a really
anthroposophy.
hard word to say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Anthroposophy.
because you want to like word it like because you're thinking of like anthropological, so you want to like put the stress in a different spot, but then you like
Mm,
got to like combine it with philosophy or
mm.
whatever. Or soft,
Crazy
soft.
Germans. It's probably
Yeah,
easier to say in German, whatever the
probably.
word is.
Yeah,
But like the it's interesting how all of this stuff develops in the particularly in the early 20th century. Um, almost as a response to like the Industrial Revolution and the rapid like mechanization of everything.
mm,
And this idea that you can act like this idea that machines like separate you from the spiritual realm or whatever. And this seems to be coming back now that we're moving into a like, you know, I think that the AI stuff is overblown, but I feel like there's a big kind of move towards mysticism at the moment in the
definitely.
zeitgeist,
Yeah,
and which is not bad, but I'm just saying it's a response to a kind of technological movement moving in. So like I think that's happening at the moment. So who knows what crazy shit will come out. But the thing about Crowley is that like the funniest story I know about him is it was actually on last year when we were doing Little Big, the other Crowley, and John mentioned that there was this wizard battle on
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
steps of some temple, or I can't even remember
I
where
think
it
that's the
was.
Golden Dawn Lodge
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
yeah, it was like between Yeats and Crowley or someone like that. Like, and I just found that so funny.
I
Like
think
being
it's
like,
A.E. Waite,
woo.
who's like the guy who wrote the decoding the key to the
Mm,
pictorial key to the tarot and like the modern tarot, the Waite's writer
mm,
deck, and there's the artist, whatever, Smith or whatever. Like I think that guy and him, and because they're in Crowley's biography Perdurabo, which I've only read 30% of, but it's pretty
mm,
fascinating. There's like something about like he saw this, asked the McGregor Mathers, and he was like, "Oh, if fires start easy but don't go out easily or something, this is a sign that you're under like magical attack." And then he was trying to
mm,
like, because Crowley went to the like, because there was like some whole like legal battle about like who could like access the like Golden Dawn Lodge, and Crowley wanted to be like initiated to a higher order, and then the people in England wouldn't let him because they didn't really like him. But then so he goes to France and talks to I think the guy McGregor Mathers or whoever was living in Paris, and he initiated him into the higher order. So then Crowley came back to England to demand the like papers for the next order and all. And it's like sounds like like the South Park, that like that wizard battle shit, like. Because again, I don't know if any of that stuff's real or not. I don't
mm.
completely discount it that people could have actual powers through, decades of, studying magic or something, but I've yet to like observe anything like
Mm.
that. And again, a lot of it still comes down to like it can always be kind of explained away just physically in some way.
Yeah.
Like,
I like the only like my access to Crowley, like other than these stories, I haven't really read any of his writing before. Um, but and based on what I've read, which is admittedly only two stories, I'm like, well, it's probably a good thing that he went into being a ritual magician or something. They were like,
yeah,
I didn't really vibe with it, but like I kind of got the novelty of it as it was like one of the first things to do what he was doing, like talking about the mystical experience of like taking a psychedelic drug and that feeling like, some reality warping kind of thing,
mm,
which, that was published in what, 1904 or something like that, somewhat really early.
yeah, something like that.
And so, that's one of the first descriptions of that kind of thing. And the stratagem as well was apparently published first by Joseph Conrad, who was like really impressed with it.
Yeah.
And thought he was sort of the opinion that Crowley would be like this famous like writing talent. And I'm like, really? Based on this? Like, it's fun. Like, there's like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like kind of ridiculous, and there's a funny like sort of send up of like the stiff upper lip, like really unimaginative, like Englishman in there. But other than that, it's like there's so much like we said before, so much cryptic shit that he puts in there that just like, what is going on? What are you trying to say? What is happening? Like, there's lots of shit like that, and then it kind of ends with a really funny, like it kind of ends in a really funny way.
Yeah.
By we're going to solve this problem with a stratagem.
Yeah. And then he's like,
Yeah.
because the whole time he's like, he's a French man. And then it's like, the Irish man then got on his train.
Yeah.
You like, you know what I mean? Like that would be like, if you wrote that now, it'd be like some like high school level bullshit. But at the time, it's probably like pretty like, whoa, what a crazy twist the ending was there. But I found that story actually fun to read. Like it had that sort of like, you know, they were like writing in Morse code with their like dragging their steps. Like the two, like, well, the basically is the plot is it's a guy at a train station talking to some believer he thinks is a French man, and he's telling him like, yeah, well, like I'm actually like a murderer and I've escaped this like prison island. And here's the story, like, you know, like we're trapped on the island, and then there was this genius guy who was like some mad philosopher or something, and then they started talking through like Morse code, through dragging like their feet in different ways, and then there was like some spy overlooking, so they had to make it even more cryptic and stuff, such and such, and then they had this plan all worked out, and then in like the end, the genius philosopher guy got like fever, and it turned out he wasn't even the philosopher, and then he's just like, so how did you escape? By a stratagem. And then the Irishman got on the train.
Yeah,
and
after telling the whole story of his stratagem, he's like,
yeah,
how did you escape by a stratagem?
They ended up not using that other stratagem.
Yeah.
But I found that fun. Like that was the first one of them where I was like, this actually is enjoyable to read for me, whereas the others I all found pretty tedious. Maybe, and there's a bunch of other stories in there. There's one that's like, it's like a novella, like it's like about 100 pages long. Maybe when he fleshes it out, it might be more interesting. But obviously, you know, he's more regarded for his like, you know, magical stuff. Like, again, I've never read any of it, but like, I think like his books like 777, and there's one he has like the Diary of a Drug Fiend, which seems to be well liked, and another one, Magick Without Tears or something.
Yeah,
I find him in an op shop, I'll read them.
Yeah, I kind of only know him, really familiar with him through Kenneth Anger, whose films I've like watched over the years, pretty much all of them, I think. You know, Kenneth Anger, I did an episode on that with Ryan Simone, which was fun. We did a few of those short films that he did in the 60s. And Kenneth Anger kind of was heavily influenced by Crowley and was very into the magic with a K, CK. And like he kind of viewed his short films as rituals, like magical rituals, like literally some of them he is actually doing rituals in the film. So like, but then he kind of turned into the, what's his name? Simon LeVay became a kind of contemporary of him. It kind of went in the more like Satanist. And I think because he was trying to be edgy, really. But he was doing that like all basically into his 90s, because he actually died recently. And he was quite old. I think he might have even reached 100. I can't remember if he did or not, though. But yeah, so that's how I know most of the kind of symbology of the Crowley stuff. I kind of know that from Kenneth Anger, and he's kind of insane and a bit of a Fruit Loop. So, but I think it's definitely the probably the best, from what I can see, from what I've read, the best kind of cinematic treatment of those kinds of symbols and that kind of stuff, that ritual magic stuff from Crowley, I think.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of kind of things. I see the Scorpio Rising.
Yeah.
And then is it one called Lucifer Rising? Is that one? Or something? Yeah, I think I've seen those two. And maybe one other one. The Scorpio Rising is a motorbike one, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Like, that was cool. And the Lucifer Rising is the one where he's like, sort of like, it looks like some magicians in Egypt or something, like doing something. And then there's like a dance thing. Or maybe that was a different one. There's one I saw it was like black background and a kind of dancer. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. So I think I've seen like three. they're all quite short. So like, you know,
Yeah, you can usually find them on YouTube and stuff.
yeah, they're
yeah,
just like
but
long music videos, kind of.
pretty much.
Yeah, like
Like
one was like specifically a guy was playing guitar, like that was written for that or something.
he pretty much like, you know, the MTV music video was pretty much inspired by all of his shit. Like just the same. If you watch it, you'll see what I mean. But like things like about the editing, like quick cuts between different images, and like it's kind of a story, but not really. Like it's too choppy for that. Which was, you know, it was more of a thing back in the MTV kind of 80s and 90s days, you know, where now like videos have to have a whole story behind them, you know, and there's like well, I don't know if they still do this, but there's like a 10-minute prologue before the video even starts, you know, like a
yeah, there'll be like a pause
thing.
in the middle of the video with like some dialogue where it's like the song doesn't have that, but yeah. I mean, they can pull it off well, but yeah.
I really like the Aphex Twin ones of that. The bizarre videos that they used to do.
Window licker and stuff like that.
But yeah, like I found, I definitely found the stratagem better. I think the drug was more of a mood piece. It was just like, it was sort of like he was being an edgelord in the late 19th century, being like, I'm going to write about a trip, man. And
yeah.
Like, and in that regard, I think he, you know, it doesn't seem as lame to me as like if you would do it now or like even in the 60s and stuff, because he's sort of the first one to do it. But at the same time, like we've, even for this podcast, we've read so much stuff like that it becomes like, you know, oh, okay, this is what he's doing. But you got to appreciate it in its context, I guess.
Yeah, I assume it's like watching like a Charlie Chaplin film or something. You know what I mean? Well, I've never watched one. People, you know, actually say they're actually good. Maybe perhaps they are. But you know what I mean? You're going to be still being like, oh, okay, if like someone did this now, it would be like bullshit. Like, so yeah, it's like something like, you know, yeah, since it's like we're like 60 years after the 60s, like it's drug trip stuff's been literally done to death. Like, I've no interest really in reading too much about like drug experiences. I read a little bit of Hunter S. Thompson, and I didn't really think it was that cool or anything. I'm sure he has good stuff. I don't want to write him off altogether, but the book I read by him, I didn't really enjoy. So
Fear and Loathing, the movie, is good. I really like the movie. Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in ages, but
again, it's got that, ooh, trippy, this is going to blow the square's mind sort of.
Yeah.
sort of vibe to it, you know, which is just really like, I'm all for blowing the square's minds, right? But like, just be a little bit more inventive with it, you know, like.
Well, Crowley definitely blew a lot of squares' minds in his day. He was always in the papers as like the most outrageous man in the world and the most evil man, so like that. Like, yeah, like definitely people should listen to that Art of Darkness episode at the least to find out about his life, because it is outrageous. Like, and like, there's a lot of stuff where it's like you have to sort of take a leap of faith with the magical stuff. Like, you know, there's stuff about him in this desert, like battling some like demon and keeping him in like a circle, and you know what I mean? Perhaps that never happened at all. Like, I think there's a guy that was claimed to witness it and all this stuff. Like, who knows? I kind of believe demons and stuff are real. I've never seen any direct evidence of it, but like, you know, they're scary to me.
Do you think sleep paralysis are demons?
Like, as in the entity? I remember being terrified after watching like that, like a half hour, like, you know, like Foxtel documentary on like the entity, and like, you know, and you just like, it's like 11 o'clock at night and your house is all dark and you walk into your bedroom and you're like, oh fuck, that sounds awful. Like, and yeah, even if it is just sleep paralysis and you have such a vivid nightmare. So I could go either way with that. It could just be like, yeah, like what they say, sleep. What they say is like your body, part of your brain does like disengages from the dream. So you're seeing reality, but then your body's paralyzed, but then there's still the dream motor working. So then because you're scared, it becomes like, because you're scared because you're paralyzed, then like you project like fears and demons and shit onto it.
And the scientific explanation is because you're in that between state, but it usually comes on when you're under a lot of stress, or lots of people who are like meth heads see it as well. So like when they finally get to sleep or something, or sometimes even when they're not sleeping, they can see them, which makes me lean on the like side of them being demons.
Well, I do think meth heads like erode part of their brain that like protects you from the demon realm. I kind of like literally believe that.
I do too, actually, because like it's like they're possessed by demons. Like when you see them, like.
And what's the difference if it's not really a actual like Bible demon or something? You know what I mean? Like they might as well be possessed by demons. Like, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, whatever that means. Like some kind of like non-physical entity that is like influencing you in some way, and that could actually just be you could also say that's if you wanted to do the, I don't know. I don't want to say materialistic or scientific, but the more, I guess, rational way of looking at it, which would be your a manifestation of your consciousness or unconsciousness or something like that's, that's affecting you in some way. Because it's not a material thing, like it's not like
but then like there's the material explanation that it is just brain chemistry, and that's where it emanates, and consciousness is just some phenomena to do to biology or whatever. Like my opinions on that kind of stuff is whether or not there's like a metaphysical underlayer or not. It's just like I don't think you can really ever know that humans are kind of probably not capable, and if you are capable to know, you'll only know it to yourself, not in a way that can be demonstrated.
There's no way you can demonstrate it.
Like, it's like when people like debate like if God is real or whatever. It's like it's so stupid. It's like you're not going to be able to convince like people that way. That's not how it works. You know what I mean? It's like if you've convinced it to yourself, that's what matters. Like, and it's not a thing I think it's ever possible to convince the whole world of. Like, there's always going to be like about half the people believe it and half people don't, or maybe there's numbers away, maybe it's like 75% believe it and 25. I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm not really concerned, you know, with like convincing people and stuff. I just like, you know, like there's the idea of like gnosis, whereas like you know something like in your soul kind of thing, versus like abstract knowledge, which is like, you know, like you have a theory about like gravity or whatever, but then it's like you also just know that if you like step off a like ledge, you're going to fall. Or you know the feeling of pain, or you know what a color looks like, but you try to explain those things. You have to use abstract terms, but those terms also have to be something the person listening to understands. So if you're trying to explain color to a blind man, it's just pure abstract terms that he has no reference for, or pain to one of those people who can't feel pain, you know? So, and that's what a lot of like mystical stuff is kind of about. Like, you know, there's like that Meditations on the Tarot book has stuff about like the layers of like, you know, mystical experience translating into gnosis, and then translating into like a practical thing like magic, and then translated that into like you can communicate to that to someone else, like you write a book about it or something like that.
Remember in the 90s and 2000 when like Wicca was a thing for like chicks with tongue rings, and like goth sort of chicks, like that's how I kind of like, and they would always say that it wasn't necessarily always you had to believe in mystical things. It was just like putting your will for something out there, you know, and like that part of it. I can kind of get behind that. Like I can't quite get behind the Satanism and the demon invoking, but like I can get behind the idea that because we all kind of do this when we're trying to affect some kind of change in our lives. We like, even if it's like really mundane, like a routine or something, it's a kind of ritual that you do, is some kind of ritual to like invoke some kind of end, right? And so I remember like there's actually an Australian one, a white Wiccan, she called herself, because she was a good witch. Her name was Fiona Horn. Do you remember her?
No, I don't know.
She would go on all the morning shows like Good Morning Australia and like Sunrise and stuff like that. And she'd look fucking crazy. She was pretty hot though, but she looked pretty crazy. And she would just talk about that, about like, it's the whole manifestation sort of shit.
Yeah.
Which like people poo poo, but like I kind of think that actually helps a lot of people. So I think it's good for people to think that way. Even if they don't always manifest what they want, it's good for them to be able to like, that's how you that's one way anyway of like taking charge of your life and where you want it to be, you know?
Yeah, well, like Jesus said in the Bible, ask and you shall receive.
That's
Like
right.
that's just manifestation. Like I kind of believe that stuff's real. Like, um, I think like, all these different schools, Wiccan, Golden Dawn, Crowley, Thelema, Magic, whatever. They're all just like different skins you can kind of put on the same thing. And it's kind of like whatever you're most comfortable with. It might even just be Christianity. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely like mystical sides of that. Or maybe you're like, a lot of people who are like, like whatever, they'll be like paganism's cool, but Christianity sucks because like their parents were Christian and they just want to like rebel and escape and something like, but for other people, it's whatever they're comfortable with. So they're like the Wiccan stuff. If like you just like goth or witch imagery, you watched Sabrina, the Teenage Witch and Charmed when you're growing up.
The Craft.
Yeah, exactly. You're probably just like, but you don't vibe with Christianity. Like a lot of them say the same kind of things. There are differences. Some I do think are more dangerous and evil than others. And yeah, like I could never get behind like any of the Satanist ones because I'm like, well, if you literally believe in Satan, like, don't you worried that he's the bad guy? Like,
yeah.
but
most of them are atheists, right?
Yeah, I know.
They just view Satan.
The modern Church of Satan is that.
Yeah.
They protest at like abortion clinics and stuff like that. Like, and like they petition the government to erect a Baphomet statue in the name of like, no preference to religion and wherever. So it's all just different skins and like whatever you're comfortable with. But yeah, I do think the manifestation thing, like I think you can manifest things. I think you got to like be a bit careful of what you ask for, and like try to do it in a positive light. But I mean, if you're just like, I'm going to have a good day today and you just like manifest that, like you can have like a little bit of, and at the very least, that's like the materialist explanation. Like, well, you're just like making yourself feel better. And then like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like if you're still feeling good, that's going to have effects through your body. You know what I mean? You're going to like, rather than stressing or something. So I think it's like, yeah, and it is hard to do because your mind is like the poisoner. It'll come in and attack you and introduce fears and anxieties and things like that. Like, and essentially for like what I try to do with like Rudolf Steiner kind of stuff is basically that of just getting control of my mind and like trying to remain in the present in sort of a positive mind state. That's kind of all I really want out of it, to just like sort of, to enjoy my life. And I don't know if you've read that book we're reading for Size book club yet, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. But it's basically all about that. It's all about getting out of your mind and living in the present and stuff like that. And like, again, that's just the new age skin put on the same kind of information. You know what I mean? You read these magic books or esoteric books, you always feel like you're getting kind of the same thing delivered to you. But it always builds on to like where you feel like, oh, okay, I kind of understand it a little bit deeper now just because of like an extra layer. But again, this is still all abstractions without like, putting it into practice. You're still just going to remain in the world of abstractions, whereas you got to like literally come to know these things like within your soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why like, usually that's why I think that Satanism actually is the bad version of this, because every Satanists that I've known, like, people who say they're Satanists anyway, I don't know how, but they've always been like unemployed losers, like, which is pretty funny. And because I think they have it's this weird thing where the doctrine of it says that, you are a god, you can like, do whatever you want, impose your will upon the world and whatever. But, also they just don't, like, they're just very passive people from what I could see. They're not really like go-getters, if you know what I mean. And it almost gives them an excuse to stay home and like play video games, because you are a lazy god who doesn't want to do anything with their life, like Dionysus on Mount Olympus, just drinking wine. And the modern day Dionysus would be like, drinking Monster and playing video games. That's what he would be doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all down to what level, like, because I think a lot of people just adopt these things for the image of it, and they get to be like,
the edginess. Yeah,
I'm a Satanist to their friend, and then that's kind of as far as like, so what do you do in your satanic practices? Well, I listen to black metal and I wear like pentagrams on my clothing.
Yeah.
And I fucking carve, do like 666 graffiti.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the extent of it.
I'm so
Most of
full
them.
on. I listen to black metal bands who make us show our Vax card at concerts.
Yeah.
That's how hardcore I am.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate nerd genre these days. Like
Yeah.
I get in the early 90s, it was probably pretty edgy, but
Mm.
now it's like just every like neck beard fucking guy that catches the bus has just got like a like black metal, like a Burzum of
Mm.
whatever t-shirt on, or some band I never even heard of and can't read the name of.
Mm.
Dark Throne's the only good black metal band, really, in my opinion, because they're more
Yeah.
of an evil rock and roll band. And Venom. Venom's just,
What do you mean? What do you mean evil?
like they use the satanic imagery and stuff like that. But like, they're a black metal band, some Dark Throne records.
He's showing me the records. Yes, very
Yeah,
nice.
they're
Lots
like-
of black.
Yeah, they're like, but they're like more fun. Like they have good riffs and like they're just like a rock and roll band that's kind of like sort of sounds black metal. Whereas a lot of black metal bands are more like this atmospheric and like just this. It's just the tone really, and they don't really have good riffs and it's just screaming. Whereas like the like Dark Throne like understands like rock and roll kind of thing, and so like they just know how to actually rock. But yeah, it's like I just evil just because it's like heavier and more like the evil imagery and stuff like that.
And the
Like,
lyrics and stuff.
yeah, exactly. There's a pentagram in their logo, or like an inverted pentagram, which is the evil one. It's like spirit is facing downwards. It's like matter over spirit. Like the top of the pentagram is. So even Crowley, his pentagram's up the right way. Like that's the non-evil one. That's like spirit at the top, like earth, water, fire, air kind of thing is the different points, and like so spirit over matter kind of thing. Whereas the Satan one is just same as like the inverted crucifix. I went to a gig the other night at the Crowbar.
Well, I thought you don't. I thought you don't do that anymore.
I don't do it a lot, but I do it. Well, the thing is, if you're talking about what I said on 8 plates, which listen to my 8 plates episode.
Yeah, that was
fun.
funny, that episode.
Yeah, he's great. I like that guy, Darius. But yeah, like what I also said was like the only type of music I enjoy is jazz, and so the group I saw was the Sun Ra Orchestra, which is a jazz act, like a big band jazz act.
Well, they're coming down here, or they did last weekend, or something like that.
Yeah, they might have been like there like last night or something. I mean, if any, I'm not sure if the tour is still going in Australia, but anyone listening, if it's in your city, go see it, dude. So good. And I saw it because they're like a cosmic, like, like jazz group, like Sun Ra. He's dead, but like it's still like some people that were like from his day, like in the band. There's like these was like all just like old head black dudes pretty much in the band, and like 10 or 11 of them on stage, and like just like all wearing these shiny like suits of like with like silver hats and like stars, and like, but apparently all the planets were like aligned or something that night, like Friday night. My dad was like, "Oh, the planets were aligned," and I was like, "That's weird." That was the night I saw the Sun Ra Orchestra. But my point was, at that place, the Crowbar, they're like, even on the menu was like an inverted crucifix, like because it's like it was like a metal bar, Crowbar. They moved location in Brisbane. They're at where the zoo used to be. I don't know if you remember that, but it's a better venue. But yeah, like the staff are just like their logo. They just got like an inverted crucifix on their like shirts. They're like work shirts, and the menu has like an inverted crucifix like on it. It's just like, this is fucking gay. Like
very lame. Yeah.
It's all, who gives a shit? Like, oh, I'm offended. The crucifix is upside down. It's like, I just turned that up the other way in my mind. So get fucked.
Yeah, and I've never I understand like the edginess of it, but it's also like as if Christians haven't seen an inverted crucifix. That's how Saint Peter was crucified.
Yeah,
I think it was Saint Peter. Pretty sure it was because he was like, I don't want it to be like the Lord's death, so invert it. So that's like,
it was his decision.
Yeah, even that imagery has like a Christian. So you're actually not being as hardcore as you think you are. Like.
Yeah, you're still within the like whatever the conception of their worldview. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, if you were like an atheist or like an anti-Christian, you just be like, well, I reject all the imagery or something.
Yeah. You're admitting that it still has power over you by like inverting it. And that's like, that goes for a lot of things, I think, just generally in life. Like when someone is too overly concerned with the happenings of the the people on your opposing political side or whatever, things like that, or like, or you're still going on about a problematic band or author or something like years after the fact, after you've stopped reading or listening to them or whatever. It's still like, it still has power over you because you're still engaging with it,
Yeah, you're still accepting like the framework, like
Yeah.
you're still within it. You're not like stepping outside of it or rejecting it
Yeah.
entirely. Like, yeah.
So
Oh, yep. Moving on.
Shall we move on? Do you have anything more to say about Crowley?
Let me look at my notes here. What I've written. No.
Yeah, well, that is good because I think it's what we were saying kind of segues into the other thing I wanted to talk about. We don't need to go into great detail about this, but this idea of Brodenism, which I find a really stupid portmanteau. And
Yeah.
like, I think the guy who invented it is not a native English speaker. I think he's from like Brazil or something. So that may be something to do with it.
Argentina, because he said Borges was his like
Oh
countryman.
yeah, all right, Argentina. All right. So because that doesn't work in English.
Yeah, like
It's-
long over,
it-
shorter.
It
or
doesn't
whatever.
matter. And also, this is not an accent thing. This is like Australians, American. We all say modernism. So it's like, it's not bruh. Like, it's not mo, bro. No one says bro.
No. I mean, I guess you say a brodonism, right? That's how it probably should be pronounced. Like brodonism sounds like stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But you can't
it's
say,
an ugly
but you
word.
can't-
Like,
but you can't say brodenism either because that doesn't give you the modernism stuff because it doesn't sound like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's a dumb
bromo
dumb-
homo.
Yeah, that's right. So it's this review that went around. This guy basically did a review on a Laszlo Krasno-Horkai book that's recently been translated. I have no idea who this author is.
I've heard the name, but just because
Yeah.
I'm always like, if I see like Slavic, I think he's Hungarian, like, but if I see those kind of like names of ski or whatever,
like,
like
ooh.
Krasno and like Russian is red, so it possibly is also in Hungarian. I don't know what Hawkeye is, other than the guy from MASH. But yeah, so I've seen the name around, but I never read any of it.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just a review on this, and like he coined this term a Brodenism, which is not so much a literary movement, he says, as a kind of like a critical like appreciation of certain books that he gives a good list of actually. And he is actually identifying a real thing. And this was something that I complained about on X the other day about how there is a certain type of like literary guy who is very different to what like we're into and our like little scene. Like we just read books and we enjoy them, and there's not really much beyond that in terms of performing our appreciation of things, because we just get on podcasts and talk about them. We're not going like, I love this guy and this means I'm really sophisticated or whatever. We like really sophisticated stuff. We like really retarded stuff. We like all different sorts of genres and all this sort of stuff. But he's talking about this thing where like, it's particularly online. There's like a lot of guys who are really into maximalist, hyper like, surreal or clinical or autistic kind of theory fictions, lots of puzzles and like cryptic like bullshit. And they're usually really big and they're very maximalist, like I said, and they're also really challenging and difficult. And like people pride themselves, guys mostly, pride themselves on like being like really jazzed up about these books online. I'm not sure that we're probably in different circles, so I've probably seen more of it than you have, Fresta. But it's very much a movement that is, I think, reacting to the current state of, quote unquote, literary fiction today, which is, as we've discussed before, dominated by women, very much kind of tired tropes of like, gay race communism, basically, like just anti-male, very identity politics driven. Like, so I think a certain kind of guy who likes to read sees that and is like, well, there's nothing for me here. But instead of doing the sensible thing like the rest of us do, which is one, either go back to the long, long tradition of like classics like that you haven't read, and I guarantee these people haven't read, they have to like get really autistically obsessed with these new kind of books from very small presses that are doing this, like really maximalist kind of ridiculous, difficult writing, usually in translation, not always. But they're the kind of person that like wants to be seen as someone who can handle difficult literature. And it's just such a like a weird, lame, kind of weirdly intellectual masculine performance. It's just like, just chill out, dude, and just read us. Just what you if you're really done with like the realist novel in like contemporary fiction, like because it's just about women navel gazing, like you should just actually go and read some science fiction or an adventure novel or a crime story, rather than like having to like have this like idea that I'm an interesting person because I read this big fat novel that is really difficult. You know, so that's he's sort of getting at that. So like this review kind of, I think he clocked that kind of guy. And online on X in particular, there was like this whole rigmarole about it and like how people were clowning on this guy, rightfully so, for his ugly portmanteau. But I think they were clowning on him because he actually clocked you, dude. Like,
yeah, I didn't. But reading it, like, yeah, the portmanteau was his greatest sin for sure. And he even, I don't know if he like re-edited. He's like, I'm sorry for the clumsy portmanteau or something. But like, yeah, I didn't like disagree that like that was a type of person. Like, I'm definitely familiar with it. Like that list of books, I was like, oh, I literally like read none of these. I read 100 pages of Journey to the End of Night and 100 pages of Gravity's Rainbow, and both of them I was kind of like, not in the mood at the moment for this. It's a bit, they are difficult. Like I thought they were good, but you know what I mean? I like to challenge myself sometimes with a novel and try to get through something difficult, but I kind of want it to be enjoyable on some level at the same time. I don't, because if it's not enjoyable or like engaging, then I'm not even absorbing the information.
Yeah. And Thomas Pynchon is like, I think a lot of these newer ones are like pretty much, they're all trying to do what Thomas Pynchon does, but Thomas Pynchon is funny and entertaining. Like, you know, even if you're not exactly sure what's going on, it's like hilarious. Like,
I've read a couple of Pynchons. I've read the, what's the post one? Crying of Lot 49. Read that one, and I read Inherent Vice because I liked the movie, and I was like, I'll read the book. But that's like, you know, his most straightforward one from what I understand. And then I read a little bit of Vineland, but again, I was like, it was again that same kind of stoner noir kind of thing. And I was like, I think I just had too many other books I had to read for podcasts. So I had to like put it down, and it's in the get to it one day pile.
Yeah. And then it's really weird to like the list of books he had was he had Gerald Murnane in there as well.
I was gonna say that.
Gerald Murnane is extremely readable. He's not difficult at all.
It's not even a big book, The Plains. It's like 200 something pages.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think that like it's funny because it's like these sorts of books a normal average reader kind of it like, I don't want to say an average reader, but a reader like us, for instance, you know, fairly educated, fairly intelligent, fairly well read, doesn't get into these books, not because they're difficult, but because beyond the difficulty, there doesn't seem to be much there. But I think for the kind of bro that he's talking about, and they're not even bros, they're like nerds who want to like have some kind of like masculine performance online that, oh, I'm so epic. I got through this like 1,000 page tome with all of its like modernist, you know, airs, you know? So, yeah, I think for us, it's just like, there's got to be something that we get out of it that, that can be appreciated, that is, edifying or whatever. Whereas I think for them, the difficulty is the point, and the talking about the difficulty online is the point as well. It's a kind of second order observation thing. Like, this is how like cool I am because I kind of, and I get this because I think when I was very young, I completely understand, but it is a very juvenile thing to be like, I read this book, so I'm the best. And it's like, dude, you just read a book.
Yeah. Well, it's like I get too, like if you read this like 900 page, like boring, tedious, cryptic book, like you want to like, well, can I at least brag?
You
that
want
I
a
did
gold
it?
medal?
Yeah, like can I at least get something out of it? Like
Yeah, can I at least have a participation trophy?
it's like that book with the Knausgard, My Struggle or whatever. Like, and people are like, oh, it's really boring, but it's really good. I'm just like, oh, he's not selling it, dude.
Oh, no, that is the thing, though. Really boring, but really good. Exhibit A, best example that probably everyone's heard of, is The Crown. Like, did you watch the Netflix series, The Crown?
I know what you're talking about, but no, I didn't watch it. No.
Oh my God, it is so addictive, but so boring. Like,
Right.
it's really boring. Like, the colors are really muted. Like, it's about the royal family, so it's not like there's adventure happening. It's just like people in rooms talking in amazing outfits, and that's it. But it is very compelling. So long and boring, but interesting at the same time is actually a thing, I think.
Then again, if it's interesting, I'm not bored. Like something can be like on the surface boring. Like me and Josie just watched this show called Wolf Hall. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I have. Based on the Hilary Mantel books.
Yes, about Thomas Cromwell and like King Henry VIII.
I've not seen it. No.
Oh, it's really good. Like, and would be boring to a lot of people because like there's like literally like no violence and stuff like that. It's just like people in like rooms talking and signing documents, and like the Cromwell guy was like sort of he's like a sort of like a low class guy that managed to get high up in Henry VIII's court, and he was like doing all the dirty work of like finding legal reasons to have like Anne Boleyn be beheaded and stuff like that. But it's really good. But although some point in the second season, this is my one complaint with it, because it's a BBC show, obviously probably legally mandated to do that. All of a sudden, Jane Seymour has like a Moroccan sister. Like she looks like Swedish, and then like her sister's just Moroccan, and they're like, oh, it's my sister. And you're like, wait, that's meant to be. And then I just started noticing like, oh, there's an Indian guy in the choir, and then one of the like guards was just like straight up black as midnight. I was like, come on, that looks ridiculous. Like, you know what I mean? If we were showing, and it's like we were saying like, oh, but it wouldn't have happened the other way. If this was a show set in like Africa 1,000 years ago, you wouldn't just like have an Irish guy. I'm just the fucking witch doctor here. Like, so the show is still good though. I still recommend people check it out. Like I didn't notice any of the multiracial casting until midway through like the second season.
The thing about that, like, I don't complain too much about it because usually it's a fantasy kind of thing. But then if you're trying to be really like real world and historically accurate and stuff like that, it kind of does take you out of it. And I think this comes from, because I do have a background in theater, that it actually comes from casting in theater, which is very different. So like, when you see it in theater, like I have absolutely no problem with it. Like if you've got a Shakespeare and there's like a white person, a black person, I don't care, because there's
a man playing a woman, whatever.
Yeah, there's a certain like heightened experience to theater, and it literally should just be about who's the best actor to cast with that, because Shakespeare exists, and like I think theater in general exists on a kind of plane of irreality, like because you're watching people in a black box pretending to live out lives or whatever. That's, I think, different to like film and TV, because especially like historical programs, it's just I don't care about someone's race, but like it's weird and creepy, like how like this insertion of people that weren't there. It's just a strange thing to do,
And especially
it's not
when
theater.
All this attention to detail to like the like outfits and the way the rooms look and like the eating stuffed pigeon and stuff like that. And it's like, and then it's just like, Pakistani person. It's like, well, we might as well have them in a Motley Crue t-shirt then at this point. Like,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Like if you're not going to bother with this level of detail, then why the other? Like, and I get, the BBC, they probably like get their funding cut if they don't have like, it's like, well, just get them to work on set then. Like, you know what I mean? If you got to just hire them.
Well, you know what I found out about the BBC, that like recently that I was actually shocked by is that it's not like here with the ABC, which is the ABC is just funded by, the government takes the taxes and funds the ABC. You literally have to pay for the
Other
ABC.
like television license or
Yeah,
whatever.
the television license. It's like a bill that you get that you have to pay. And I'm like, that's outrageous.
Yeah. Well, BBC does make quality programming.
It
Like
does, yeah.
ABC, if I had to pay for that, I'd be like, get fucked. Because the best
Yeah,
shit on the
me too.
ABC is always like from the BBC or something anyway. Like at least
exactly.
BBC had like, I don't know, Jonathan Creek or something. Peep Show. It was Peep Show BBC?
I can't
remember.
I think it might
Channel
have been
4 or something,
Channel
maybe.
4 or something.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And they didn't even do that.
But and it does have good stuff, but it's a very strange kind of thing. But this adds to the theory that I think I can't remember who came up with this theory, but the world was ruined by theater kids, because this is theater kid mentality, which works in the theater, right? That kind of thing works in the theater because you're not looking to be absorbed in it in the same way that you are with like a film or TV show. But because theater kids have like ruined the world, they've applied this logic to Wolf Hall, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
Back to Brodenism.
Yeah, this is this is not a white nationalist podcast. We don't need only white people on screen. We're just talking about this very specific genre. But yeah, Brodenism, I don't think there's too much to say for me other than I just think it's what he's talking about is actually a thing, and the people who like got butthurt about it were all the people that he was identifying. Like it was just very clear to me because they were saying, what does this even mean? This portmanteau sucks. Blah 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 blah. It's like, well, he's just talking about you, dude. Like, because these people are always like critiquing, someone like Sally Rooney, who I actually really respect now. Like after reading all of her shit, like I respect her because she's actually a fairly good writer, and I hear the latest one is really good. Her best one yet.
I'll read it if you want to do it.
Yeah, okay. But she is in that mode of like women writing about everyday mundanities and like their relationships and shit like that. Which, if that's, and I think all of these guys are reacting to that and they don't like that, and they don't often say it. They're always just saying like, oh, it's the prose is plain. I want something more heightened. I want something that like goes beyond the realist or something like that. And I'm like, well, read fucking Gene Wolfe. That's what I say.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's like anything like experimental music or something like that. Like, I want the experiment to be a success. Yes. Like where like they produced, like I'm fine with like, yeah, I'll be patient and like gave something a proper go. But if like they never, like even back to the Sun Ra Orchestra, the opening band was just like some like uni student bullshit where they just like some like chick comes out and she's like, oh, we're just like does all the like acknowledgement of country, and then it's like we're just gonna like resonate and see what happens, and then they just spend like 25 minutes building up in this boring way, and then they'd get into a jam that I'd be like, this actually sounds all right, and they would hold it for like 30 seconds, and then the drummer would change, and then they'd just go into like another 25 minutes of uni student nonsense, and then like get into a jam, but they would only last for like half a minute, and then you're like, wait, that was like 50 minutes of like, I could say I got 3 minutes of enjoyment out of the whole thing. But then like, the Sun Ra Orchestra come up, and then she's like, bow, just like straight into it, just grooving for like an hour and a half straight. Like not a second of it was bad. Like, so it's like they're real professionals. But yeah, like it's like anything, like a book, like this book he reviews in the Brodenism article. It sounds interesting to me, but it's like one long sentence. Isn't that like the Pierre Guyotat kind of thing,
Ducks Newburyport is the recent woman's version of this. Yeah. Which is just, I think it's like 3 sentences, but it's like a 700-page book or something.
I don't need that. That doesn't add anything to me. I'm sure I can read around that. Like, I'll just be like, yeah, that comma, I'm considering it a full stop. Like, it's like Cormac McCarthy. It's like, I just put the quotation marks in there in my head. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, they're the whole the literary exercise of like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like I've written a long sentence before, and usually it's an exercise in showing off as a writer, like that you can do it. But the thing is that you could or like you could read it, but if you were to read it out loud, you would insert places where you could insert commas or full stops or semicolons or whatever. But like it's usually just to, wank yourself off, really. Like a 500-word sentence, let's go,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very, very different to a book long sentence, obviously. But even then, it's just the sort of thing where the ands or thens or things will just stand in for punctuation. At which point it's just like, well, what's the point of this? Like.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I want the story to be interesting. Like, and like the story as he described, it didn't sound bad. It was something about Nazis or whatever, in Germany. I don't know, whatever.
But that's the thing about this kind of person that he's identifying, is that they're not really into story. Like they think story is like old hat and like exhausted or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's not.
There's like the Gavin McInnes quote where he's like, women read fiction, only men just read non-fiction. I was like, no, what? I just got to read history books. And
non-fiction is a fiction is a narrative anyway. Like,
yeah.
Men, if that's true, which I don't think it is, and men are just reading like histories and stuff like that, they're reading narrative histories. They're not reading like, a literal timeline of like this happened and that happened. Like, so even
they're not reading the field reports or whatever. Yes. They're reading someone who compiled the field reports and picked, and make craft. And that's the best kind of nonfiction things are, with some kind of like, even if it's just like a biography or whatever, like if someone can write it in a way that creates a compelling narrative, then it's a pleasure to read. But like, there's a lot of those ones where it's just like lists of facts and dates and names and stuff. And you just like, never can get a flow on, and like it's just like the subject matter itself might be interesting, but you're just like, for me at least, I'm just like zoning out and never getting like an actual solid like chunk of enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, basically what I think is happening here, and what the guys identified, is that this group of guys who are very invested in, and I don't doubt their passion for like literature, capital L literature, or literary fiction, are kind of like they see what's happening in like mainstream publishing and mainstream literary fiction, which is very feminine coded and very like has its own tropes, but they're still committed to this idea of literary fiction, which is an idea that I actually just think needs to die, because I think all of the stuff that you're looking for, you're going to find it in genre fiction, but they can't do that because they're so invested with being a person who reads literary fiction, hence why they go to these kinds of books and no other books, So that's kind of my interpretation of this whole thing, and why it became a big drama where all these guys like bleating like women about this portmanteau.
Yeah, when you brought it up, I was like, I hadn't even heard of this. And then I like read the essay, and it was like, I remember there was that video of those like Aussie chicks in like the office, and they were doing some like song and dance thing about like having a bob and wearing a dress or something, and everyone was like cracking up. But I remember, was like complaining about like, this is why the world sucks. And I remember like Brendan from Tales from the Mall just quote tweeted. He's like, it's like, I don't understand why everyone's upset about this, and to be honest, I've masturbated to this video. That's how I kind of felt about this article, without masturbating to it, obviously. But I was kind of like, I don't really like understand. So I had to like go on Twitter and like, search Brodenism to see what people were saying. And like the best tweets were just like the name's stupid. And some people like, they just seem to be like, I didn't really like, again, like, maybe this guy's a dweeb that wrote the article. It seemed like he read the book and like gave it a,
it's a pretty good review.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you got a sense of what the book was like. Like, and then there was something about like, I caught one bit where he was like, something about modern day fascism in Hungary. I assume he's referring to like Viktor Orban or something, which I've not looked into, but I bet he doesn't meet the definition of a fascist. But whatever, that's fine. Nowadays that word doesn't really mean anything anyway.
He's just pro people, his own people having babies, which apparently is fascist now. He's
like probably like a 90s or 80s like liberal, maybe 2000s even. Like,
but yeah, you had some stuff that you wanted to get off your chest as well, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, that's right. the Deadwood movie. A couple of things I want to refer back to previous episodes. So I finished watching Deadwood, the show. Show's good. I don't think I remember starting it back in the day. I think I only must have watched like the first two seasons, and then so I didn't really remember the third season. And the third season gets kind of like psychedelic and weird. Like Brian Cox is like this theater guy, and it gets all kind of like, yeah, it gets kind of trippy. But and it has like this like villain in the last season, George Hurst, who's like this like big mining sort of like guy, but he's like, like he gets people murdered for, like if they're like union organizing on his mine sites, and he's like come and try to buy up the town and all this stuff. And he's like the villain of the third season. And then the way it ends is like kind of like a lot of people don't like the ending because it's like sort of they don't kill George Hurst. Sorry, spoiler alert. They don't kill him or really get any revenge of it against him. It's just like this one prostitute tries to shoot him. Well, she does shoot him, but he doesn't die. And then they just kill this other prostitute and like convince him that's the one's corpse because they like Trixie, the other one. And just basically do this thing to save the town kind of thing. Like to just get him out of there, appease him, and then he still gets to go on being like a big bad like mining guy. So I think a lot of people were like upset that like, oh, it wasn't this big like him being like hung in the street or whatever, like but for the show like Deadwood, it's just that would be silly. Like and the point is, it's like the show is called Deadwood, it's about the town. Like everyone in the town is kind of a bad person. Like there's no like heroes or anything. They're all kind of conflicted. They all have like moral, gray zones or black zones or whatever. Like, so I thought the ending of the show was good, but then the movie came out like 10 years later and I'd never seen that. I watched that and it's like the freaking Reddit, like the Reddit fans one, because it starts off just with like Jane drunk and like, hey, remember she's a drunk, and like it's all these like little winks and nods to like, hey, remember this guy, and
member berries.
Yeah, it's like very like that. And then like they bring George Hurst. I thought it was just gonna be a whole new thing with a new villain or something, like a whole new story, but they just bring George Hurst back into town and now he's some like US senator, and they sort of like they don't kill him really again, but they sort of like disgrace him and he gets beat up in the street and all this stuff. Like it just seemed like, hey, I know you guys didn't really love the ending, so let's bring back the old villain and like have him just get a bit of a more of a like comeuppance kind of thing. And it was, and it just felt real wooden. Like it just didn't have the same spirit. I know 10 years goes by, people change, and yeah, it just, I don't know. I thought it was Reddit essentially.
Yeah. Well, if you have like, because they did end on their own terms, didn't they? Or like it was cancelled or not? I can't remember.
I don't know the story behind that, but it feels like they could have gone on for another season. But
it feels like a cohesive ending. Like
seems like it does seem more like an ending where like it doesn't like leave on a cliffhanger for another season or anything, like which I think the other seasons sort of more do have that. So I believe they probably went on their own terms.
I think when a show gets big, it becomes this thing where you have to like after a certain critical mass and like even nostalgia builds up, you have to like revisit it, like especially something like Deadwood, which is about a town like you said, and a whole heap of characters, like, ooh, what happened to this person and that person and whatever. But yeah, some shows just really benefit from leaving the ending as it is, even if there's like some unanswered questions. Like The Sopranos is the other like good example of this. And
then that movie sucks too.
Yeah. And the ending of The Sopranos is perfect. Like it's a perfect ending to that show. And yeah, they're just like, people complain about it though. Like, oh, what does it mean? Like,
I don't think it's that cryptic, the ending. It seems to me just like, he's always going to be looking over his shoulder. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, if it just ended with him dying, or if something like getting, you never know if those people were there to like whack him or not. And that seemed perfect because it's like, if he's going to continue, he's just like, it's never going to be like he's going to get some like closure, and that would be the like, or the like some like get in some peaceful state of whatever, of being secure. It's always, if you're going to be the boss or whatever, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder. You're always going to be like, someone's going to be trying to take you down, and it's going to happen eventually.
And the same thing with the way that Deadwood ended, which is that, they kind of, it sort of coheres this idea that of the community, the close-knit community there, but also that industry has arrived and all of the things that come with all of that. And like, you don't need to, because it's talking about a certain moment in time, right? It's the transition from how the West becomes, incorporated into civilization, sort of, and quote unquote civilization, because civilization has its own savagery. And yeah, that's a great kind of way to kind of end it. There's worse ways to end it anyway. And apparently they did end it in a worse way with the movie.
Yeah, it's just like apologizing for the ending and then some memberberry nonsense and like whatever. Wasn't awful to watch, but I just like me and Joe said at the end, I was like, that sucked, right? Like, yeah, what a stupid movie. It was funny though because like Jeffrey Jones is a character in it. He's like this like newspaper man, and you know who Jeffrey Jones is?
No,
he's the guy who's like in what's the Crucible, and he's in like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but he's like a pedophile in real life. I think
my God.
I think
really?
Not little children. I think it was something about like a teenage boy pedophile. Like, so
okay.
Something about, I'm not sure what the real story, but like, so in the movie, I was like, are they going to keep him? Like, cause I know it's like whatever. And he was actually in the movie, like didn't really have much in the way of lines, but he was in there. So I was like, all right, well, that's something they kept the guy. Like,
it's like Poochie in The Simpsons. I have to go to my home planet now. And they just like,
well, because Powers Booth is dead, like in real life, and his character, like, but the way the show ends, like you could imagine that Powers Booth is probably not going, or the character he plays, Sia Tolliver, is not going to last that long, because in like the end of the second season, he gets stabbed by this like preacher, and then like the third season, he's just like this broken man, and like just real like becomes real kind of pathetic because he's got this like constant like open wound, and like it's like stabbed in like the fucking like bladder or something like that. Like, so it's he's just not even mentioned in the like the movie because the guy is actually dead, but like it's a place like Deadwood, anyone can die any second of any day anyway, so it's like they don't really even need to explain away why a character's no longer there. So I just thought the movie was Reddit. If you're a completionist, might as well watch it, but don't get your hopes up.
Yeah. Was that all you had to complain about? This is that's what's on our getting our goat hour. So
one other thing I just wanted to address from a previous episode was you talking about Jesus Christ Superstar, and I was saying how there was like a Liebach album of that, and I said like I considered it one of their whack albums. Well, I've been listening to it and I changed my mind. I like it now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's their name again?
Liebach, Laibach.
Okay.
So the name is like, they're from Slovenia, Ljubljana, but Laibach is the German name for that city, and it's the name that it goes under whenever they're like under German occupation, which has happened like several times through history, including during the Nazi years. So that's why it's kind of an offensive name there. Like they were like, even like they had to like clandestinely like advertise their gigs. Like, the Rammstein logo has that like plus sign kind of thing. Well, that's actually the Laibach like monolith. So like really? Rammstein would be like super influenced by Laibach, but the stuff of Laibach I like is more their early, like the first stuff is kind of like noisy, like it just sounds like Soviet factory kind of noise, but it's not just pure noise, there's rhythms and like it's cool. And then like they have some sort of neoclassical stuff where it's like lots of trumpets, but with like real militant like drum beats, and then it'll have like them just speaking in this like bap voice of like quotes of like Joseph Tito and stuff like that, like recontextualized to make it sound like super like authoritarian and fascistic, or they'll either be in like Slovenian, German, or English they'll speak in, but then they just have albums that sound more like your kind of like industrial rock, and they have all kinds of weird albums and stuff like that. But the Jesus Christ Superstar one sounds kind of like your like Ministry, kind of like Rammstein-y industrial rock metal. But I've been listening to it and I like it now.
There you go. See, this is how tastes change as you get older, I think. Like,
I'm 2 weeks older. Do you have any venting or any shows?
I wanted to vent about the Brodenism thing. It's funny when we like mentioned boring as well, because I'm really loving the new season of The White Lotus. I love that show. It's great. But my man, like, he's finding it boring. And I'm like, this is hilarious and amazing writing. Like, how can you not find it boring? But, I think he likes a bit more he likes he's more trashy in his tastes.
Right,
so-
like reality TV.
yeah,
or-
we should go back to watching Love is Blind, I think. I'll just watch White Lotus by myself in the spare room. Or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I got to watch the new season. I went
Yeah.
past that like Dusk candle store, and they had like a White Lotus X Dusk like candle
Oh my
range.
God.
But I'm like, I always just walk past that store. I'm like, I can't deal with the smell of that. It's too coconut vanilla. Like, in
Yeah,
your face.
it's not great Dusk, but I don't know
No.
if they have Dusk in America, but it's sort of like a witch. It's not a witchy store. It's kind of like a mainstream witchy candle store, right? Like,
Yeah,
this air of like mysticism, but it's really kind of commercial.
corporate, like
yeah.
sort of, make your house, or like the diffuser rods and
Yeah.
pumpkin candles, and just like they're just not nice smells. Like I like more like herby and like, whatever kind of smells where they're just more like straight up just vanilla blast and like popcorn.
Vanilla Blast.
Yeah.
That's a great name for a flavor, Vanilla Blast.
It's actually a black metal band.
Is it?
It's like a all white guy. I mean, they are.
Yeah,
They're
Vanilla
predominantly
Blast.
all white guys, no
Yeah.
matter what. Anyway, it's like always a gimmick. They'll be like, this black metal band has a black guy in it, and then all the racist ones are like, yeah, we don't consider that real black metal.
That's funny. All right. Well, if we've got nothing else to complain about, I've got plenty to complain about, but we'd be here all day. So,
yeah.
And you'd probably like to get on with your day off.
Yeah, sure. I got nothing to do right now, but yeah.
Thanks for chatting again, and we'll talk. Actually, the next episode is going to be the 100th episode, so we'll have to do something for that.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I'll put my thinking cap on.
All right.
All right. Well, see you next time.
See you later.
Ciao.
The bells roam in the mountains. earth on the earth, and thunder be the river that drowns man's last words, and melody be the soundscape of the wind and the lashing rain. No wake away, unnatural peace, until nothing of them remains in the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God. Nothing of man remains in the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God. Nothing of man remains in the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God. Nothing of man remains in the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God. Nothing of man